The Eterna Forest in Sinnoh is home to some pretty awesome Pokemon, and a couple of bugs. To see how these Mons stack up in Sinnoh, let's try to beat Pokémon Pearl using only the ones you can get in this version of the forest, in addition to a couple other rules. Platinum has way more options, so Pearl seemed like more of a challenge. Also, in this version I can get the very best Pokemon to ever come out of that forest. It's certainly my favorite, but what's your favorite Eterna Pokemon? Before I can get that though, I meet up with my bad influence friend, and together we raid this unattended old man's bag. But this raises the question, are the Pokeballs labeled? Because if not, how do I know what's in them? It doesn't matter that much who I pick, but choosing the turtle will give my rival a significant advantage for most of the video. The old man either doesn't care that we stole his Pokemon, or he's so furious he went to get some weapons and have a beatdown. Either way, let's get out of here. Lucas shows me how to catch a Pokemon, but there are no Eterna Forest Mons around here, something he doesn't seem to understand. When I get to Jubilife, I run through the city like a woman on a mission to get a flower bud, because that's the first encounter of Bidoof. Rosie will be pretty great later on, but having only that girl on my team right now, well, it's not going to be great. Due to her lack of useful stats, she focuses on absorbing Bidoofs, avoiding basically every other Pokemon. This leveling up process takes quite a while, but it's necessary to get her to level 7, where she learns a very useful move. After a bit more leveling up, I'm still not confident I'll win this rival battle, but I can't beat up wild Bidoofs forever. Eventually the population would collapse. Now, both of his Pokemon resist grass moves, but that's all I have. So after a Quick Claw Stun Spore, and a Water Sport in case I ever get past Starly, Rosie then begins to spam Growth. I'm normally not a fan of relying too much on stat boosts, but I have no choice here. Eventually, after taking too much damage, she absorbs health from that bird and knocks it out. Chimchar chooses to not use Ember at all, though it would still do more damage than Scratch even with that Water Sport. The end result is a relatively simple battle, where I win first try. Would you look at that? He's heading to the gym in Oreburgh City, and I follow along only to find it abandoned. Turns out I need to pull Rourke from this mine, a natural and completely safe place for a child, like myself, to be. As everyone knows, children yearn for the mines. Once he's back doing his gym leader job, Rosie can get 2 growths in, barely surviving that rock. Thankfully, a Mega Drain heals a good chunk of damage. Onyx's health is also stolen, which is good because Cranidos is kind of scary. In the end, only the thought of a giant, hard-headed dinosaur is scary though, because my Rosebud easily knocked it out and I got the first badge. I didn't expect her to be such a high level at this point, so now it's time to win her trust by running back and forth like a madman. We do this in Oreburgh City and Jubilife for thousands of steps. I really need her to like me. That way, Rosie evolves at level 16, just in time to learn Leech Seed. That is a move I really don't want to miss. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more forest videos, or just general awesome Pokemon content. I get the Rock Smash HM, but Roselia is not strong enough, meaning I need to get an HM user. And in Sinnoh, there's no one better than Bidoof, who actually does reside in the Eterna Forest in Platinum, not in this version. So he'll be relegated to using HMs. I'm getting so close to the forest now, Rosie can feel it, but some galactic losers block my way. Fine. Let's just save this windmill place from Elon's favorite planet. Now this Zubat quad resists grass, which is still all I have, but between Leech Seed and a bit of growth, that bat is defeated easily enough. Purugly though, I was concerned about. It is a fully evolved Pokemon after all, but I shouldn't have wasted my breath. That was a cinch. With that, I saved this stinky father, but to be honest, I didn't care about him. I just wanted to get back to my forest home, where I encounter my namesake, Cheryl. You know what they say, birds of a feather have the same name and travel through the forest together. The first forest encounter is a Baneri. I try to use this bunny as much as possible to level it up because Rosie is way over leveled, but there's only so much he can do. Next I encounter and catch a Wurmple. This girl will evolve into a moth. I can feel it in my bones. And I'm proven correct when it evolves into Silcoon and eventually Beautifly, who, as we all know, is the moth of butterflies. The next Wurmple obviously becomes a Dustox named Fly. But there is one final encounter here, the best in the whole forest, a Misdreavus. He's the entire reason I'm doing this in Pearl. In Diamond, you get Murkrow instead. Now Honchkrow's not bad, don't get me wrong, but it's also not Miss Magius. Granted, we'll have to wait quite a long time to actually get one. With a full team of 5 Pokemon, let's challenge Gardenia. Fly starts off against Cherubi to gust a bunch of times. Being bug poison, he quad resists grass. After a potion and a leech seed, it's time to swap. Into Bugs Bunny, who hasn't quite warmed up to me just yet, so he's full of frustration. It's also more than enough for Turtwig too. Against her final Pokemon, thanks to several missed Stun Spores, a Cherry Berry, and the simple fact that Baneri hates me for removing him from his perfect forest home, that fully evolved Rose is pruned, and it was way easier than I expected. I didn't even need to use my other quad grass resistant moth. I encounter yet another planet with more intimidating Pokemon. But this time I have a frustrated rabbit who wins the battle mostly on his own with a bit of Leech Seed help from Rosie. I told you that move would come in handy. I save this Bike Maker guy and his Clefairy, who sits at the table like an equal? Not in my house, you weird little Kirby wannabe. At this point, I'm rewarded for seeing some Pokemon. Not all that difficult a task, to be honest. But I shan't complain, as it gets me the experience share, a crucial item to help balance out my team levels. In Hearthome, this lady doesn't know how to control her Baneri, so I'm forced to step in. It's not hard, I've had a rabbit for one whole gym now, so I'm basically an expert. Though it does hurt when the Amity Square lady doesn't even pretend to consider I might have other cute Pokemon. What's wrong with these guys? Aren't they cute enough? Fantina refuses to battle me, even though as a gym leader, it's literally her job. Can I complain to a board and get her fired? Sometimes it's okay to be a Karen. I'm not sure how to do that, so let's just take my anger out on this unsuspecting kid. Baneri defeats his Starly, but is endeavored in the process. That was a solid move, actually, as was my pivot to Mischievous, avoiding a Fury Swipes. Now Psywave is technically Psychic type, but it does random fixed damage without regard to super effectiveness, meaning it's not great, but it's still good enough to defeat Monferno. My still over-leveled Rose easily defeats the Wada Weasel, while my under-leveled Moth gusts his Rose for the win. With no badge to get in Hearthome, I instead head to fight Maylene, and I get to her very last Pokemon, Lucario, but Fly simply can't do it, and gets bone rushed to death. Well, that was my very first loss. Not too bad, all things considered. For the second attempt, Beautifly easily gusts Meditite without taking any damage. Mischievous now knows Psybeam, but was foresighted, making him vulnerable to fighting moves. He sacrifices himself to confuse Lucario, who immediately snaps out of it. What a waste. Rosie Leech Seeds and pivots to Moth to paralyze. Several gusts later, my Moth actually wins. It's nice when the underdog Pokemon, i.e. these bugs, can actually do something useful. I then help Lucas get his super important Pokedex back. It's not like the professor is just handing these things out to every kid who passes through Sandgem Town. Actually, it's exactly like that. Anyway, Crasher Wake, here we come. Mischievous now knows Shockwave, which shocks Gyarados right to death. Floatzel is not quite so impressed, and is fast, so my Ghost never stood a chance. My now no longer over-leveled Rose dodges an Ice Fang with her nimble flower feet to Giga Drain the Wada Weasel. Quagsire then suffers the same fate, winning another easy badge. As I'm trying to investigate the non-exploded Great Marsh, wait a minute, does that mean I'm just following around this innocent rando? Anyway, I'm doing something super important probably, and not at all stalkerish, when Sherlow rears his bedhead head. Here is where Mischievous really starts to shine, and I show off why he is currently, and likely will remain, my highest level Pokemon. This Ghost is remarkably versatile, easily defeating Sherlow's Pokemon with super effective moves while barely getting hurt. Just you wait till he evolves, eventually. First, it's the bunny's turn though. Mischievous and even Rosie will still have to wait. In Celestic Town, this old lady drops some unnecessary and, quite frankly, unwanted exposition. I'm just looking for another place to get some badges, not learn a new religion. I then meet up with Cyrus, who talks in my general direction? Was that directed towards me? I'm then forced to backtrack to Hearthome again, where Fantina was likely reprimanded by the Pokemon League for not doing her duty. In other words, now she'll battle me. I lead with my Ghost against her Child Snatcher. 2 Shadow Balls easily knock it out. Her Miss Magius is obviously tougher than Mischievous, and I'm not sure why it didn't Shadow Ball on the swap. Lopunny has Shadow Ball and a Choice Specs to make up for his crappy special attack. Even after being confused and hitting himself a bit, he gets a crit and knocks it out. Roselia survives just long enough to lead Seed Gengar, in the off chance Mischievous is bested. But clearly, that doesn't happen. He's way too awesome for that. In case you don't believe me, here he is once again, lacking hands, yet single-handedly destroying Sherlow. Holding an expert belt certainly helped. At some point, this guy's gotta get so disheartened he just gives up, right? But today is not that day. Actually, it's a much better day. You see, before battling Byron, I can finally head to Iron Island. Now, this may not seem worthy of celebration, but deep in the heart of this mountain, I find a shiny stone. Though, apparently I didn't record that very important moment. Sorry, Roserade, I didn't capture your moment of glory. That kind of sucks. Now watch this drive. Roserade gains access to Weather Ball, and when used in the sun, it becomes a fire move with 100 power. Coupled with an expert belt, this guy never stood a chance. His Bastiodon does survive a bit with rest, but never does anything of note and falls to a crit. It just felt appropriate that father and son both lose to Rosie. Now an explosion happens, but there's no TV to see it on. Dang, Platinum just makes quite a bit more sense. This invisible explosion causes a bunch of Magikarp to flop around, a bit like fish out of water. I would feel bad for them, but my empathy only extends to Eterna Forest Pokémon, which doesn't include any water. A few Team Galactic boss defeats later brings us to the 7th badge, Candace. I didn't really want there to be hail this battle, so Roserade uses Sunny Day, while Snover uses a 4 times resisted move, for some reason. Fine by me, Weather Ball knocks it out. Sneasel also chooses a stupid non-ice move, which was his downfall as well. Metacham also doesn't use Ice Punch. What is with this girl? Finally, Abominable Snowman avalanches, and at this point, I'm just glad that someone used an ice move. Beautifly hits a decently strong gust before falling. Lopunny's jump kick was way weaker than expected, and he dies too. But at this HP, Mischievous defeats that Mon and the 7th gym leader. That was an interesting battle, to say the least. When infiltrating Team Magma's warehouse, I find a Dusk Stone, but I need Mischievous to level up just one more time first to get Perish Song. And now, finally, he can evolve, becoming even more of a beast than he already was. I take a quiet nap in the break room, but read the sign first. Thank goodness. I might have accidentally slept with someone here, and that would be awkward. With my Pokemon well rested, it's time for a Cyrus battle. With an expert belt, Mismagius easily knocks out his first 2 Pokemon, while Lopunny is frozen and does nothing to Sneasel. Beautifly somehow wins with a few silver wins though. My victory means nothing, as Cyrus's plans continue unhindered. He still summons Palkia, who breaks the Sinnoh region sky back into its RGB-based colors, which is a byproduct of space manipulation, I suppose. Sherlow tries to give me backup at the mountaintop, but starts with a Munchlax. Way to bring your A-game, dude. I still do my part and win, letting me fight Cyrus again. Though we did this like 5 minutes ago, somehow his team is now all fully evolved. Alright, I swapped to Dustox, mainly as a sacrifice, but he also does some chip. Even with a drill peck to the face, my bunny overcomes his natural fear of birds and returns, knocking out Honchkrow. But that was short-lived. Beautifly doesn't do any better. Roserade poisons Weavile and hits a few times, thanks to Cyrus being an idiot, but not a complete dunce. When she falls, Weavile is hurt enough for Mismagius to finish it off. Crobat and the Gyarados are then both thunderbolted, and that's the end of that. I am voluntold by Rowan to clean up Cyrus's mess by facing Palkia. And by face, I mean I turn tail and run, which was apparently thrilling for that old man. His life must be so boring if that was exciting. Speaking of, Volkner agrees to battle to overcome his boredom. Lopunny has learned Dig, as rabbits are wont to do, but even with an expert belt, it fails to one-shot, resulting in a paralysis. I forewent a Cherry Berry here because I thought the extra damage would be enough. Guess not. Well, this rabbit is kind of useless now, so let's do plan B, Roserade. Ambipom Nasty Plots and Agilities before swapping into Octillery? Why would you do that when I have a grass Pokemon right here? I mean, Aurora Beam is pretty damaging, but still. Next time, I anticipate a Baton Pass and Leech Seed Luxray right as it comes out. Several Thunder Waves and hits later, Roserade comes out on top while getting fully healed. The two-tailed monkey then has no one to run to and is quickly defeated. With all 8 badges now in hand, The only thing standing in our way is a waterfall. But Jasmine, who you might recognize from my Ilex Forest video, makes a cameo here to solve that problem. Thanks, lady. I get some much needed experience in Victory Road, for my most important Mons, mainly, and I start our final rival battle. Staraptor is choice spec thunderbolted by Mismagius. I swap to Roserade expecting a crunch, but get Ice Fanged instead. That wasn't great, but thankfully he does a foolish Aqua Jet, letting Rosie heal a ton. Beautifly is sacrificed against Monferno, so Mismagius can Psychic, though he does get burned in the process. That burn means he loses to my rival's Roserade, but he did enough that even Dustox can defeat it. Snorlax and Lopunny trade hits back and forth, with Lopunny staying healthy enough with a Drain Punch Shell Bell combo. That doesn't quite work for Heracross though, and even with minus defense, Dustox still can't do it. I'm down to my last Pokemon, but it's Roserade, so clearly I can still win this. And I do, gaining access to the Elite Four. Technically, this was my second attempt. On the first one, Lopunny had Jump Kick instead of Drain Punch, and it didn't work out well against Snorlax. At least the Poké Center I scurried to was like 5 feet away, and I could try again immediately. Anyway, let's start the end of the run with a Aron. For this bug guy, I'll rely mainly on Roserade's Weather Ball. It works for Fly, and Moth, at least. Drapion has Ice Fang, or Aerial Ace, so I pivot to Dustox. Not expecting him to survive, he U-turns into Lopunny, at which point Aaron swaps into Heracross. My bunny makes a valiant effort, but it clearly doesn't work. My Moth then avoids a Stone Edge to gust the fighting bug. She is defeated by Vespiquen, but now it's time for Mismagius. The queen is shocked, and just for funsies, I use Perish Song on Drapion. 3 turns later, Aaron has no one to swap to, and it dies. Honestly, I feel like he will probably be the toughest Elite Four member for my current team, but we'll see. Bertha clearly will not be. Her first 2 Mons are both water ground and are easily expert belt Giga Drained. Sudowoodo survives a bit and does get a special defense sand boost, not that it helps. Hippowdon also survives a hit, but it's not nearly enough. Last Golem is Giga Drained, and that's the end of that. For Flint, I start with Mismagius to choice spec Shadow Ball. Not sure why Rapidash thought a Solar Beam would be a good idea. The Child Snatcher is one shot, but thanks to the specs, Mismagius swaps with Dustox, who inevitably dies by these monkey hands. Magius then comes back out to Psychic a few times. Lopunny chooses to not even try to Fire Punch, and charms right into his grave. This time, I sacrifice Moth to Steelix, so Roserade can show off my plan B. A Rain Dance Weather Ball combo. It would have been awesome to blow through this guy with a grass type, but it's unlikely he would have given me the chance to set up. For Lucian, Mismagius now has an Expert Belt, which is more than enough to Shadow Ball Mr. Mime. Girafarig, not so much. I'm trying to get fancy here, expecting a Psychic that Bunny could Mirror Coat right back, but this 2-headed giraffe saw me coming from a mile away, and kills it with crunches instead. Moth defeats it with a Bug Buzz, surviving a Shadow Ball in the process. He is then Fire Punched by a Pure Power Zen Master. With that normal Mon out of the way, Mismagius simply comes back out to Shadow Ball this guy, and Alakazam too. Bronzong has super high defenses of course, so I do another Perish Song here. My Ghost doesn't live to see it work, but Roserade does. Alright, you know how I said Aaron would be the hardest Elite Four member? I clearly was not including the champion battle, because no matter how you slice it, Cynthia is a beast, beating me not just once, but twice. My strategy for the third attempt is actually very similar, all things considered, but it just works out a little bit better. First, I begin with Fly to Toxic Spiritomb. He then stalls with Protect, before doing some chip with a U-turn. At this HP, Mismagius can handle it. Mismagius can also survive Roserade's Shadow Ball as long as it doesn't crit, and it didn't. This time. That was actually the reason for my first loss. My Roserade then Giga Drains yet another water ground Pokemon. I remember back in my day, Quagsire was unique, but not anymore. She then takes a Psychic, but Leech Seeds Lucario. I pivot into Dustox as a sacrifice, using a Payapa Berry he had for Spiritomb just in case. To maximize Leech Seed damage, Lopunny uses Dig, getting an awesome crit. That was pretty good timing. 2 of Garchomp's moves don't affect Mismagius, meaning I can bring him out for free, and Shadow Ball a couple of times before he dies. In order to have any sort of chance here, I need to slow this dragon down. Hugh, a Focus Sash Beautifly who doesn't miss Stun Spore. Thank goodness. That was the reason for my second loss. That bug dies, bringing out bugs with a 4 times effective Ice Beam, doing remarkably less than expected. Well, this is unfortunate. 2 more pathetic Ice Beams later, including a full restore, Garchomp chooses to Giga Impact, knocking out my bunny, meaning it's all up to Roserade. But that was a stupid move, because now Rosie gets a free shot to Miracle Seed Giga Drain. Her last Pokemon is the Water-type Milotic. Between another Drain and her first ever Grass Knot, Rosie is the sole survivor of Cynthia's massacre, something that will inevitably go down in the history books. So I may have won, but before ending the video, I would be remiss if I didn't highlight another key aspect of the Eterna Forest, the introduction of the Mossy Stone. Leveling up an Eevee in the vicinity of this random rock yields a Leafeon. So while it may not be officially an Eterna Forest Mon, it's certainly an honorary member. Now you might question why such a rock was needed, when leaf stones are very much a thing. To which Game Freak says, shut up, but I'll change it later. There's also this old abandoned building in the heart of the forest, populated by Ghastlies and the occasional Rotom. But since this is a separate map aside from the actual forest, I didn't include them in this video either. Not that I needed them, my team of 5 Forest Mons were more than enough to beat this game. Admittedly, that final battle required a bit of luck, but hey, we still did it. If you like this video, let me know, and stay tuned for the next regional forest, this time in Unova. I'll see you there.